All right, everyone, we are recording. Welcome to our week 3 live classroom. Congratulations on making it like 15% of the way through the course. I'm proud of you guys. All right, so let's take a glance at week 2 real quick. Couple of things that I wanted to bring up. I love seeing profile pictures on iLearn, so if you guys haven't uploaded them, please do. Yeah. As far as peer review journals go, I have changed the prompt on every single one of those assignments. Basically, all I want to know is just how you're doing in the class. So if you want to talk about great things that you've learned or inspiring moments that you had with the discussion board, that's awesome. But at the end, I just basically want to know if there's anything that I can do to help you out. So any questions about the peer review journals?
I couldn't make the video to work, like with the review from you.
Oh, really? My audio was messed up?
Uh-huh.
Did anybody else have that problem?
No.
No.
Spencer, you're able to hear me?
Yeah, no, it was fine.
All right. Well, Lena, I'm going to look into that for you and see if there's anything different about yours. So yeah, I mean, just as far as that feedback goes, did it look like an attached file like this, Lena, when you saw it? Yeah, and it just
I mean, I can open the page and then there's nothing there. It's just dark screen, nothing there.
Huh. All right. Well, I'll look into that, and if it doesn't work, then I'll do something else. All right. So a couple of things about week 2. All right. I got several questions about semicolons and if they're necessary. Several students noticed that they could have the robot move forward or move backwards without having a semicolon. Okay, and that's true, you can. We always want to put semicolons in our code though. They conclude the statements that we put on each line of our code. Without those semicolons, JavaScript can at times do unpredictable things. So better safe than sorry. And to practice good coding standards, always put a semicolon at the end of your statements. I've also had several questions about using tablets with text editors. Those of you who have tried know that it's not the most ideal thing in the world. While tablets are convenient in some ways, coding is not one of those ways. Okay, so especially as we move forward into week 3, it's going to start being important to be able to have a browser open where you can open developer tools and analyze any errors that are going on. So you really want to have a computer up with Google Chrome from here on out. Had some questions about control structures. Our assignment last week with Robbie the robot was the default control structure of just going from top to bottom. Okay. In future assignments, we're going to use functions for most of them. But yeah, so you guys didn't really have to worry about any of that last week. Assignment submission file types. The more simple, the better. Okay, I got a few zip files last week. So if you can, just submit like a screenshot or a doc file, Google Doc, just something simple. Okay. And then last thing that I got a lot of questions about was why this didn't work. This move backward with a 4 in the parentheses or any number on one of those functions. And here's why. Okay, so we're not going to touch this for a couple of months, but when you have a value inside of the parentheses of a function, it is called a parameter or an argument. Okay, so if I pass in an argument right here in this move forward function, that means that the function itself will have a parameter that accepts that value. And we could use that as a variable inside of this function. So let's say I called the function move forward 3, and then inside of that move forward function, I could do something with that value. However, it didn't work for us last week because that's not how the function was written. If we had had a function that said like move forward a bunch, and then in here we had a loop that said, okay, for however many times you have that number, let's move forward. Okay, that would have allowed us to execute the move forward command multiple times, as many as the user passed in as an argument. Okay, but the way that the code was written, it didn't support that. It didn't have any parameters, and so that's why it didn't work. Any questions about this or anything I just sped through? Okay. Sounds good. Then without any further ado, let's dive into week 3. All right, so week 3 deliverables, we have our review questions, which you should get used to. Those will be due Tuesday night, same as last week. And then we're going to have an assignment in HTML. Okay, it's pretty simple. You'll just have a header and a couple of paragraphs, but we do want your HTML code to be well written and validated without any errors showing up, and you'll have instructions on how to do that. So you'll have that initial submission onto the discussion board Wednesday, and then you have Thursday to review other people's code and comment on other code, and then Friday night will be your final submission that I will grade. Okay, and then Saturday you have your peer review journal and your self-assessment survey that you'll have every week. Any questions about these deliverables?
So when we submit the final submission, it should be as primitive as as the assignment is, right? So the assignment says 1 header, 2 paragraphs. So that's how it should be, right?
Ideally, yes. And here's why. So all of your assignment submissions from here on out will have an auto grader to grade them. And if you start adding like tables or a bunch of other stuff to make it more complex, the auto grader might be overwhelmed and not really know what to do. Okay. Now, I will have you know that I review all of these personally. So you can feel free to submit a complex assignment, and as long as it meets the basic requirements of the assignment, I'll give you 100%. Okay, as long as it was validated and it had that header and 2 paragraphs, I don't care if you threw in like 50 tables. Okay, I'm looking for just the base requirements. All right, but if you see in the instructions for the assignment submission saying like, hey, keep it simple, that's because of the auto grader. Okay, but know that I will always grade your stuff personally. Okay, if you submitted it and you got like a 10% because of the auto grader, know that I'll go back and grade it and give you the grade that you deserve.
So I can throw in endless memes and all kinds of crazy.
Yep, you can if you want. And as long as none of them insult me, you'll get a good grade. All right, good questions, you guys. Any other questions?
I have a question about the quiz.
Yeah, go for it.
So I took it and I know the answers, but I think the way that you have to answer, it didn't like the formatting. Because like the last 3 or 4, it marked them all wrong. But
okay.
Like, what are the characters that begin an HTML comment? And I had put those in there. And then it gave me an error that said, check formatting, like no HTML has to have an end tag. But the question asks, what are the characters that begin? So I didn't add an end tag. So I'm like, oh. So I have 2 more chances to take the quiz, but I would like a little direction on how to answer that correctly, because I thought I had the right answer, but I don't think I formatted it right.
Yeah, so with that, any specific questions regarding your quizzes, I would like you to email me personally.
Sure.
And, you know, whether you take a screenshot or you let me know like what you submitted, feel free to email me and we can discuss it. But outside of that, what I would recommend is, you know, just have your book open. All the quizzes are open book, and you have 3 tries to submit the review questions. And so, you know, for a comment in HTML, let me open up a program here. 3. So if I put a comment in here in my HTML, there are specific characters that I have to type in to have a comment, and then I can put in whatever I want for my comment. Okay, and so I would recommend just having your book open, and so you can see what a comment looks like there. And if you tried something here that didn't work that you feel like should have, just let me know.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Good question. All right, any other questions? Okay. All right, so this week, if you don't know already, we are covering HTML. This is the only week that we are focusing on HTML. We will be using HTML throughout the course, but only as kind of a container for your JavaScript code. Okay, so all of your code submissions, they're all going to be HTML documents, but after week 3, we're worried about the functions that you write in JavaScript. Okay, so just for your info. But this week we're covering HTML, which is very important in the life of a programmer. So let's just dive into this. So today we already talked a little bit about text editors. It doesn't matter what text editor you use. There are lots of different opinions out there as far as which are best. But you can use Notepad++, Brackets, Atom, Sublime, Visual Studio Code. You know, any of those are fine. Anything that you can edit code with and save it in a file that it can read. That's all you need. Okay. I've used many text editors, and my favorite, especially for this class, is just Sublime. But anything where you can actually like see the colors and stuff, like it'll work. Okay. And then in here, you can copy the file path or click on Open in Browser, and then run those HTML files in a browser, and you can actually see what you're running. Okay, so need a text editor, need a browser, and that's what we're going to use the rest of this class for all of your programs. Okay. And if you guys want to hear a rant about it, then I have a little video about using Sublime and Visual Studio Code in our video spreadsheet. I really love both those programs, actually. Anytime I write code in Python, I use Visual Studio Code. So they're both great. All right, HTML basics. So all HTML files have the HTML extension as their file type. All right, and then there are a number of required elements of an HTML file. And you'll see this in the chapter that we go through. But also this week, you will be led to this page in W3 Schools. W3 Schools is our friend, okay? It's great. You can see there's a lot of stuff about HTML over here, a lot of stuff that we're not going to touch in this class. But you can also see there's a little JavaScript tag here or link here. And so throughout this course, we're going to spend a lot of time on the website. But you can see here I have a simple HTML document, okay? And you can see this is what it rendered, and this is all the code that was included. All right, and I could take this code if I wanted to and save it in a new file, and I'll just say temp, and I'm saving as a .html file type. Okay, so I have temp.html. I have some nice colors here, and if I open this in browser, I don't think my browser settings are set up, but if I copy the file path, I can just paste it here in the URL, and you can see I'm just pulling a file from my desktop here, and I can run it, and I can see this exact same thing. Okay, and this is what you want. Okay, you want to be able to save a file in your text editor, copy the file path, and run it in your browser, and you can see exactly what is being rendered by your code. Okay, so let's go back here. And then this W3 Schools page, I mean, I could add other things here as well, and then run it and see how it gets rendered here as well. Okay, so we have this HTML document that has several required tags. In our book, we have more required tags than are listed here. So if I come into week 3, into preparation, chapter 3 HTML basics, let's see, here we are, required elements, okay? And so these are all the elements that will be required for you in your assignments, okay? Just for your information. And then you can see like an example of an HTML document here that kind of built on this, okay? Any questions about this so far?
I have a question from a few minutes ago.
Yeah, go for it.
So did you say that using Notepad or using Visual Studio Code, any of those, it's the exact same?
They can perform the same results, okay?
Okay.
So what I just did with Sublime, where I saved a file, an HTML file, and I can see like how the code is rendered here, or not how it's rendered, but you know, I can, it's nice and colored for me. Any text editor will do this, okay? And so you could use Notepad++ or Brackets or Atom or Visual Studio Code or Sublime, and you would have a very similar outcome.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. All right, moving right along. HTML elements, okay? So an element is extremely important in HTML. An HTML document is formed of simple elements. So you look at this, every single one of these lines of code is a different element in HTML. Okay, so if I look back at this, you can see I have a tag name, which in this case it's div, which is short for divider. Then it has a class, which is a certain attribute, it has an ID, which is another attribute. And then this opening tag closes right here with this little greater than sign, okay? See, it opens with the lesser than and then closes with the greater than. And everything in there is the opening tag of this HTML element, okay? Then we have a closing tag, which looks really similar to the opening tag, except for two differences. One, it doesn't have any attributes, and two, it has this little / right there to denote the ending of this tag. And then inside of it, we have whatever content that we needed to be inside of it. Okay, so if I look back at this, you can see I have a bunch of different tags. Now, what I like to do whenever I'm writing code is, I like to tab these different things over so that I can see what all is in each tag, okay? So you can see I have an opening body tag and a closing body tag. And then I have multiple things inside that body tag. Same thing with the head. I have a head tag with a title tag inside of it. And everything is inside the HTML tag, okay, before it closes. And so I like organizing my code like this because it's really easy for me to see where things are, okay? And then in that example, we had a div tag and it had some text here, you know, and if I ran this in my browser, I'll just refresh this. You can see I have a div tag down here with some text in it. Okay, so an HTML document is comprised of a bunch of elements. Each element has a tag, an opening tag, a closing tag, and then a content inside that tag. Now, we'll go into this here in a sec, but not all tags have something inside of them. Like, it's not required that they have a value in between the opening and closing tags. And not all tags have a required tag or a required ending tag. So let me blow this up a little bit. All right, so here are some common HTML elements. There is the doc type HTML, which is always required at the very top of an HTML document. We have a comment here, which is, we've already seen that today. We have the HTML tag, which we also just saw, the head tag. The head tag is used for different almost settings of your HTML file. And so the only tag that I had inside of my head tag just now was the title tag, which actually shows up in the tab in your browser, like as like the text up there in the tab. There's a meta tag, which provides information about the document, which resides inside of the head. So does the title. Script also resides inside the head. The script tag is where we put all of our JavaScript, and I'll show you that here in a sec. We have the body tag, which will contain all of our HTML code, okay? Like H1s or different headers, divs, paragraphs, breaks, inputs, text areas, canvases. These would all go inside of the body tag. And they all do specific things in HTML, okay? Any questions about this? Okay. All right, case sensitivity. HTML is not case sensitive, okay? So you could put HTML tags like this or like this, have it mixed up, and your code would always be rendered the exact same way. However, you should try to be as consistent as possible. Well-formed HTML will look like this, okay? Notice that all of these tag names are all lowercase, except the doc type, okay? If I switch this to lowercase, it would still work just fine, but this is considered well-formed HTML, okay? So just all the tag names are all lowercase, but it isn't case sensitive. JavaScript, however, is extremely case sensitive, okay? I don't know if any of you tried this, but if you tried typing in move forward like this for Robbie the robot, it would not have worked, okay? Because the function name was move forward with a lowercase m, and when you typed in move forward, the computer is trying to find a completely different function. And it's like, this function doesn't exist, okay? It's because JavaScript is case sensitive. So remember that when you're going into this, HTML isn't case sensitive, but JavaScript is. All right, so I've already mentioned this twice today, but let's go into a little bit more about well-formed HTML, okay? There are a number of reasons why you want to have well-formed HTML. We don't really write code perfectly the first time around, at least I don't. And so anytime you have errors, it's really nice to be able to find them quickly. And that's really facilitated by having well-formed HTML. In addition to that, having well-formed HTML will produce less errors. A lot of the time, if you have HTML that's not written well, it can produce errors down the road. Okay, so let's go into three main things. The document contains only standard tags and attributes. Okay, that'll be pretty simple to do if you just follow what you see in the book and what you see on W3 Schools. Opening tags have closing tags. Okay, and then like I said, there are a couple of exceptions. The meta, break, and input tags are all exceptions of this rule. But outside of these, everything else is going to have, just about everything else will have closing tags. And when I say that, I mean this body has an opening tag right here, and then down below with the backslash body, it has a closing tag. Same thing with the paragraph that starts right here and ends here, and this italic tag that starts and ends right around culinary. Okay, these all have opening and closing tags. If I go in here, and let me blow this up a little bit, if I wanted to put a break right there, that's it for a break. It doesn't have a closing tag or anything like that. And then if I put in an input, I'll just put a placeholder. This is an attribute called placeholder, and I can just, I'll show you here in a sec. This is text for my input. So if I save this and run it, you can see there's my placeholder. This is some text for my input. And then once I start typing, it's gone. All right. And you can see there's a break here between this div and this input. All right. And so these are two of the very few tags that don't require closing tags, and the rest do. Okay. All right. Let's see here, this stuff's getting in my way. Any questions about well-formed HTML or anything else that I just covered?
I have a question about tags.
Yeah,
Like,
go for it.
there are so many tags that are basically the same, like, I don't know, bold, strong. I know the browser reads them differently, but why do we have them all, like, I don't know, italics and emphasize? I mean,
Yeah.
they do the same thing when you see on the, like, what you see on the browser, it's the same thing.
Yeah, it's interesting. So HTML has come a long ways since its inception. And honestly, I never really use this I tag. I never use the B tag for bold. I never use the strong tag. There's a thing called CSS, which if we look in here, I can click on it right here. Kind of goes hand in hand with HTML, but I can have, I can basically add any type of styling that I want to any of my tags. And so if I wanted text that was bold, I would just do it in CSS. If I wanted text that was italicized or larger or smaller or anything like that, I would just do it with CSS. And so when I say that HTML has come a long ways, like those tags aren't really used very much anymore. They still exist. No one's done anything with them, but they're not really used anymore because now there's a better way to do things. And so to answer your question, that they were made a long time ago, and now there's a better way to do styling, and so they're still there. But yeah, does that answer your question, Lena? Okay.
I mean, I have a general idea of how CSS works. I was just curious because they're like the same looking.
It's a very valid question, and yeah. So if anyone's curious, so CSS, there's a couple of different ways to do it. I could add a style tag right here and just say like color blue. And this is CSS kind of embedded in my HTML. And if I ran this now, you can see that this some text right here is blue. Okay. And it's the same thing with all CSS. I could have a background color or center some text on a page or, and a lot of different things. So, all right, but that won't be required for the class. That's just if you want to know or if you want to get crazy with your code. Any other questions about this? Okay, let's move on. So required elements. We talked about this a second ago, but I like the colors that a text editor provides. So we saw this right here in nice, beautiful black. And if I paste this exact same thing into my text editor, save it as an HTML file, and take a screenshot, this is what it looks like. Another good reason to use a text editor. Okay, because if I have this right here, if for whatever reason, you know, if I didn't close this tag, or if I have, you know, like if I have this error, like if I missed closing this style attribute, you can see it changed a lot of this color. This div isn't pink anymore. This input isn't pink anymore. Neither is this. And I can see, like, wait a second, something looks kind of off. And you know, so text editors really help you be able to find errors as well. But these are the required elements. So all of your assignments that you'll submit in this class will have this as a skeleton. And so yeah, just try to remember that. So let's go through a couple of examples. Okay, we've been using a text editor today. I've showed you that file a few times already. A couple of common errors, if you look at the end of this chapter. So there are a couple of common errors that this chapter warns you about. For this example, this div tag was never closed, okay, like it is here. And all that took was just to miss this little greater than sign, and it's not closed, and that will do funky things with how your code is rendered. This one is as well, what I just showed you. This one is missing the closing quotation for this attribute. And as you saw just now in the text editor, that'll cause you some funky errors as well. And it can also cause your code to not behave as you would expect. So let's say I had this style attribute on this paragraph. And you know, let's say I forgot to end my paragraph. All right, if I run this, you know, it could cause this to be blue because it didn't end. Whereas if I put this outside, oops, if I put this outside and then I have a div inside my paragraph, then it would make all of it blue, okay? And so these are just a couple of errors you want to watch out for. Forgetting a closing tag, or improperly nesting tags. So you notice this one, this bold tag starts inside of the div, but then it closes outside of the div. You can have nested tags, you know, so I could have the bold inside of the div, but I can't like mix and match, okay? And then another big error, which is why I kind of emphasized this earlier, is not saving your file as an HTML file. Okay, if I took this exact same thing and saved it here, just as like a text file, for example, then all of a sudden I don't have any of my colors. If I tried to run this in the browser, it wouldn't do anything. So make sure to save these as HTML files. Okay, so those are a couple of common errors. Any questions about these?
Do you recommend purchasing a license for Sublime?
No, I don't. I've used it. I have purchased a license a while back. I actually haven't put that key into this computer, but it's not required, especially for the purposes of this class. I wouldn't recommend you to. IDEs or text editors, as they get more complex, they start costing money. This one right here is one called IntelliJ, and I would never buy it. It's provided by my work, but it's a really expensive program. You know, but for the purposes of this class and for Sublime, you know, they provide it free of charge, and encourage you to register it, but it's not required. So for this class, I would say it's not required to register it. So good question, Spencer. Any other questions? All right. How many tags? Template file. Okay, so this is one thing that I wanted to go through with you guys, is creating a template file. If we look at, let me see if I can find. So back in our content tab, in our overview page, There's a link right here for live classroom recordings and assignment recordings. And in here, I have this video of making a template file. This is something that's covered in chapter 4, but I would encourage you to review that. But basically what we want to do is have something that we can easily come back to every time we have to make an assignment. You'll be making assignments every week. And so it can be difficult at times to remember all of these required elements. Okay, so when you see that required elements part in the chapter this week, I would just copy that and paste it in your text editor and save it as a template file. If you're curious as to what my template file looks like, CSS isn't required, but I have some right here. I have a defining table template right here that I can just add to when I need to. I have a template function, which you'll do something very similar to this next week when we go into JavaScript. And then I have just some template stuff, just some basic stuff in here for my body. Okay, and so I would recommend you to do something similar. I started doing what I just said by copying those required elements from the chapter, and then as I went along in weeks 4 and 5, I just kind of added to it. I had this spot for defining table and for just a function. But a template file is really helpful because then anytime you need a new assignment, you can just copy this in a new file and make the necessary changes that you need. So I would recommend you do that, even though it's not required for the class. I guess the last question that I have is, do you guys have any questions about how to run this code in the browser? Because you'll all want to do that this week with your assignment.
You just copy and paste the address or location of the file, correct, in the browser?
Yep. Yep. So if I look here where I was running it, you can see this is just my C drive. And when I copied the file path in here, Google Chrome automatically added like file / and then this. But yeah, this is just a direct file path on my computer, and then it can open up in Google Chrome or any browser. Good question, Spencer. Any other questions?
Well, I was just going to say I was following what W3 Schools was showing me to do by doing it in my notepad and then saving it, and then I just double click on it and it would open up in my browser. So that's
awesome.
A different way of doing it, but you want us to do it this way, right?
Nope, it's the exact same thing.
Okay.
Yep. So if you find an easier way to do it, that's awesome. Yeah, so because depending on your computer, I mean, you can set HTML files to open by default in a browser, okay? And that's what most computers do, but once you start coding, you find that you might want them to open by default in your text editor. But then also your text editor will have an open in browser button as well, usually, that you can use as well. So, but they all do the same thing. They open up the file in the browser. So, good question. Any other questions? All right, you guys. Well, I'm pretty sure that's all I had for you guys. If you have any questions throughout the week about your assignment, about HTML, any funny jokes, any questions about review questions, just send them my way, and I'll respond as quickly as possible. So, all right, you guys. Thank you all for coming, and I'll talk to you all soon.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you guys. Have a good day.
Thanks.
All right, bye-bye.